Right, good afternoon. Hello to all of you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you're suitably caffeinated after your networking break. Thanks to the Midnight Foundation for inviting me along. Thanks to you all for coming to this panel. Thanks to our panelists, who I'll be letting them introduce themselves in a second. My name's Geoff White. I'm an author and investigative journalist, and what I cover is organized crime and technology. So I've written quite a lot about the use and misuse of cryptocurrencies, blockchains, alternative forms of finance, etc. Notably, actually alleged by the North Korean government, but we might come on to that in this panel. We're going to be talking about the near and far future in this. We're going to be talking about innovations to watch in privacy and security, and we have got three fantastic panelists joining us to discuss all of that. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting, if I may, with Bob at my left here.
Yep. Hi, I'm Bob Blessing-Hartley. I am the CTO of Shielded Technologies, the DevCo or lab for the Midnight Network. I joined Input Output a year and a half ago as head of architecture, and have been working with Markulf and Sebastien ever since. I have one quick point I want to make before we get into questions, and that is a minor correction of a statistic Charles mentioned of 21 days getting to 2.5 years of Bitcoin. It's actually 12.6 days. We have a lot more room to go. So, yeah, it's.
Always good to start with a pop at the boss, I think. There we go. Sebastien.
Hi, Charles.
Over to you, Sebastien. Give us the once-over. What should we know about you?
Yeah, my name's Sebastien. I'm the CTO of the Midnight Foundation. I've been in the blockchain space professionally since 2018, and I've been working in the privacy space for the past 3 years or so. Most recently now, I've collected my new hat and joined the Midnight Foundation as the CTO.
Good stuff. Markulf, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Markulf Kohlweiss. I'm an associate professor at Edinburgh University and a research fellow at IO Research. I worked on privacy and zero knowledge since my PhD, so that's 2006 or something like that. So it's way before Bitcoin. Yeah.
I want to start with you, Markulf, if I may. One of the videos I watched of you talking, you were talking about how the technology that sits behind Bitcoin had been around for a while, you'd been aware of it, lots of people in your world have been aware of it, and then suddenly you see this thing break out and get adoption in the public and so on. I just wondered, in terms of where you're sitting at the moment, what do you see that's common knowledge in your community, if you like, but is kind of coming over the hill and you think might take off and get public adoption, get pickup?
Thanks, Geoff. So yeah, very good question. I mean, I would say it's zero knowledge. Like if Bitcoin, if the big tech there was like consensus, which again, it existed in the 80s already, but Bitcoin kind of brought it out, rolled it out for the masses, so to say, or for really high assurance real applications. So I would say what's coming up now is hopefully a similar revolution for zero knowledge, where we see it to be used for privacy, for good. It's also kind of associated with scaling. So I think Ethereum is primarily pushing zero knowledge for scaling. And I think that's a good thing because it means that the privacy will also be super fast. And then there are lots of other things that I could talk about, like trusted execution, multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption, post-quantum security, but we might get into that next year.
Yeah, I want to come back to you on the zero knowledge stuff, but I'll move on quickly to Sebastien. For yourself, what's coming over the hill that you're excited about? What innovations do you see that you're getting interested in?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of people working on the cryptography side of zero knowledge and blockchains in general, but a lot of times when you go look at the code, there's a giant disclaimer that says that this is not for production use, please do not use this, has not been audited, and that's kind of been the norm for many years, but I think we're finally seeing a lot of these technologies come to life, and I think one of the unique parts of the Midnight ecosystem is that we are not scared of actually productizing this technology, and that's why we're one of the first ones to bring a lot of these technologies to market, and we'll be bringing a lot of new things to life. So it's really awesome to not only see the frontier, but also help bring it to life.
Yeah. Just, Charles mentioned the part of Midnight was talking about the dApps next year in that game plan he had. What about smart contract innovation? What do you see coming down the line that you think is going to change there?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things that people have been trying to solve is how do you make the dApp experience, the dApp developer experience really easy while also making the user experience private. These are hard to get together, and if you look at a lot of the previous attempts that have in the market, usually the developer experience is bad or the user experience is bad, and people have had a really hard time reconciling the two. And I think one of the really awesome things we've been able to solve at Midnight is making this a lot more seamless for the developers. They can build good experiences without having to kind of go so much in the tech that their minds start exploding. And so the team at Shielded has worked really well on this model called Kachina, which helps solve a lot of the data issues that have plagued a lot of the ZK industry for the past few years. And so I think we have a lot of not only interesting technology, but also a lot of really good innovations from the engineering side that I think will make Midnight a very usable chain.
Yeah. Again, I'll come on back onto that in a second, but I want to move to you, Bob, lastly, again, for yourself. Innovations in the space that you see coming down the line, what are you excited about?
So the innovation that's most important to me is Midnight and the evolution of it. I mean, where I have been in my blockchain journey is I started off in a very private space, in other words, permissionless blockchain, and slowly made my way over into public blockchain. I view Midnight as the most exciting innovation to hit the market next year because it is the fusion of those two things that allow you to have the privacy when you need it and the public nature when you need it. I mean, it's both of those things combined into one thing. In terms of additional innovations, we're going to see exciting stuff coming in terms of the cross-chain connectivity, initiating transactions from Midnight on other chains. There's a bunch of work that's going on in the research space with Markulf and others in this, really trying to bind the blockchain ecosystems together as one. Charles mentioned the layer 2 for everybody. That's where we're headed, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Right, I want to come back, Sebastien, to you on this. In terms of the smart contract developers, what are the kind of pain points for those folks at the moment? What, if you could wave a magic wand and solve a bunch of problems for those folks, what do you think needs to happen to get that really cooking, that area?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts about developing in the ZK space has historically been management of data, as well as management of concurrency, which is if you have a bunch of concurrent users all coming at the same time, but the state is private, how do you have them all access the state, update the state, and make that in a way that is easy for developers to reason about the state of their systems, but also do it in a way that actually scales. And we've seen many different attempts at solving this that were fairly limited and fairly hard to work with for developers. And the idea people had before is, well, let's just put all the difficulty on the developers and hope that will work out. But and historically, if you look at the past, that's just been too hard for developers to solve. And I think with Midnight, with Kachina and the model that Shielded has built, we've been able to move a lot of that difficulty not to the developers, but rather to the ledger itself, to the blockchain itself, and have the blockchain automatically resolve a lot of these hard problems so that we have a great experience for the users as well as a great experience for the everyday developer as well.
All right. Okay, we'll see where that goes in that case.
If I can add a little bit to that, the other thing that we're doing that's really innovative for a public chain is our smart contract language, Compact, has been donated by the Midnight Foundation to the Linux Foundation as it's called Minakawa, the project. And the goal there is to allow it to become a privacy language for any chain. And so we're injecting input from beyond just the Midnight and Cardano ecosystem into the language to help it grow, become easier to consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it,
I mean, one thing I want to say is maybe that, like, this trajectory of saying, well, we take something that's very foundational research, like Kachina, which is the PhD of one of the kind of main developers from Midnight. So he went on from his PhD to kind of work on actually implementing it, and then also to standardization, where then everyone can use it. So I think that trajectory from very basic blue sky research, foundational, towards, well, doing the hard engineering and testing and seeing that it works and how do we make it usable, to something that then actually is kind of given away as a standard. And I think that is very exciting to me.
Well, I've got you, Markulf. Can I come back to you on the zero knowledge proofs aspect? I mean, it does seem like a very, very usable piece of technology and quite a handy way of solving more and more issues in terms of giving over passwords, giving over credentials, companies sitting on data and then getting hacked and it leaking out. And yet, as far as I can work out, there's doesn't seem to have bedded in massively in society, the zero-knowledge proofs thing. What is stopping that? What are the barriers, the hurdles that have stopped that dog barking?
I mean, I think that's the million-dollar question in many ways. And I think it's out there more than you might think in some ways. It underlies digital signature schemes. It's based on zero knowledge. So I think it is, first of all, it's probably like more, it's out there more than you think. It's like a lot of kind of the thinking of security experts is kind of based on similar ideas. I think two challenges are probably that it's very difficult to wrap your head around it, and also traditionally it was very expensive to do it at scale for arbitrary computations. And I think both of those challenges, I think, are being addressed just by the sheer mind power of having so many people look at it. Like in the past, there were maybe like tens, maybe hundreds of people that did research on zero knowledge, and now it's like lots of developers in the blockchain system have heard about zero knowledge, can get their hands dirty, start thinking about it, and they're at all different levels, from the how do I explain this to my grandmother, which is extremely important, to, well, how do I build the next system that's post-quantum secure and runs this much faster. So I think the amazing thing is that there are now like a lot more people looking into this, and not just people, also AIs, and we just have a lot more ways of scaling and solving these problems.
Yeah.
Like AI has made complicated things kind of easier to use because the learning curve can be bridged a lot faster, and I think that's also a factor.
Yeah. Do you think public demand can be part of this? Because I've watched, I mean, in terms of the stuff that I've watched of both yourself and Sebastien trying to explain this stuff, the principles of zero knowledge, when you actually see it, it's like, oh yes, that actually looks quite handy. But then part of me was sort of itching to think, well, yes, but how can I actually go ahead and use this? Do you think public demand can feed into this? Is there a message that can be sold effectively to the public to sort of say, look, this is good stuff, you should be asking for this, demanding it maybe?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of demand from the public, actually, and there's actually two sides to this. One is from the everyday person, where a lot of people are currently looking into stable coins and doing more and more business with stable coins. They want to adopt this, but are hesitant of the privacy implications, having a single transaction reveal their entire financial history. We've actually seen a lot of demand from this from governments and large companies who want to adopt more blockchain technology, but have trouble reconciling this with privacy laws, right? How can I adopt blockchain technology if it makes everything public, and my privacy laws in my country make that I cannot make certain things public? And so this means that they require rational privacy to actually adopt a lot of these blockchain technologies. And so we've got demand from all different sectors looking into this technology. And so I think there's a lot of interest, but to get to one of the difficulties is that you have to kind of rethink about how we communicate together, because the solution a lot of tech companies have built in the past is just, well, just put it out there, right? We'll just put all the data out there, and that's obviously the easy solution. That runs into a lot of downsides, like front-running attacks and all these other things where your public data can actually financially very negatively affect you on a day-to-day basis. And so now that we have this new technology that enables us to have a better and more private systems, it's not just a technology problem, there's also a human problem, which is how do we figure out a new way to work together, to cooperate together, to achieve the same things, the desired results in a way that...
Maybe on the human side, I quickly jump in. So I think one thing that will greatly increase demand is the fact that no one trusts anyone anymore. Like if you have a trusted party, everyone trusts that party, you don't need zero knowledge. But such a trusted party is actually hard to find, and usually that trusted party would exploit the trust that people put in it in making, well, taking their cut, and it will be a very big cut. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to think of privacy as kind of digital physics, which is that in the digital world, sometimes it feels like you can do anything, anybody can get away with anything. But actually, there's rules to the digital world, because there's some mathematical problems that show that something is fundamentally impossible. And a lot of the study of cryptography is trying to figure out what is possible and what isn't. Yeah. And I've been there. We're trying to figure out not only what is possible, but bring these physics to life, so to speak, and have everybody come together and, as Bob mentioned, make our learnings public and get this in the market. And so we're doing lots on every side of the equation, from the core research to also the productization. And it's been a lot of learning for everybody.
My motivation behind this, and where I think we have to get to, is we have won when people aren't talking about zero knowledge proofs, when they're not talking about midnight, when this is underneath everything that powers the next generation of the internet. So we can sit here as technologists and talk about these great things, but when it's just pervasive, that's when we have won. Yep. And that's the goal here. Privacy as a foundation for all of our interactions, followed by transparency when it's mandated or desired. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one talks about TLS or HTTPS, but we're all using it all the time.
Yeah. By the way, on your comment that nobody trusts anybody anymore, I would hope as an investigative journalist I can still cling on to a tiny little bit of public trust.
Yes.
My fingertips.
You need that too, yeah. I'm just saying that it will drive up the demand.
Yes.
Less trust, the more demand for zero knowledge.
Indeed. And actually this brings, Bob, I want to put this to you first of all and then to the rest of you, to an interesting question here around the fact that a lot of the large technology companies, and I'm thinking of Google and Meta, frankly are built on the principle of targeted advertising, of hoovering up data and using that, monetizing that data. You're now looking at moving then to more private, more secure forms where people control their data and control who has access to it. How does that square with how these companies have frankly got rich? Do you think they're philosophically ready for that shift?
I have a very strong opinion on that, and I call it kind of the illusion of privacy. I mean, I was at Microsoft Research, and they had a talk about it was kind of contextual privacy, and it said like what privacy is depends on the context and about how users, I mean, it's a bit cartoonizing that. It was not as bad, but they felt as long as the user is not offended, then he has privacy. And I see that as the illusion of privacy. Like, as if Google, Amazon, and the other big companies, if they have all your data, but they kind of predict using AI what would upset you if they use that data, and then they use that data in the way that doesn't upset you and maximizes their own profit. I call that the illusion of privacy. That's not real privacy. That's not rational privacy. The only person, or the only organization is being rational here is the big company that has all the data, and no one else has. It's kind of your right to rationality and freedom and all those good things that Charles mentioned. At that point, it's basically been taken away. So that's kind of my dystopian view of the illusion of privacy and the simulation that you kind of your life that you then end up being in. Yeah.
Those large companies have opened up Pandora's box for us. You know, our information is out there everywhere. I do believe that they can be collaborators in a new vision of privacy first, responsibility. I think you'll find that there's a strong movement even outside of the crypto industry for that kind of activity where it's like, okay, I don't want my data used for AI training. How do I make sure that doesn't happen? I don't want my medical records exposed on the internet in an irresponsible way. So I think consumer demand is actually going to help those large entities, and we're seeing some of that in the discussions with people we're collaborating with on Midnight, as well as future cryptography projects, that there's definite interest in that new model. So I think we'll see a shift.
Yeah. I mean, I sounded maybe very negative, but I actually also think that almost no one really wants that kind of dystopian future that I was painting. There might be some market forces that drive this form of centralization, but I think really no one wants it, except maybe for the 1% or 1 promille that benefit from it and kind of cling on to it. But I really honestly think that no one wants it, and everyone is looking for an alternative. Just how to build that alternative is a challenge, both socially and technically.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people, for example, are kind of scared of working with AI because they're like, oh, this AI cannot take any action without its, sharing all its data with the big company. And the question is, well, sure, that's true for the AI, but what about you? In a lot of cases, that's true for you as well. Every action you take, especially on a public ledger, is also visible and tracked and taken advantage of by everybody. And a lot of people don't want that. And I think it's not a surprise that, with AI, people are thinking a lot about privacy more. And with a bit of self-reflection, they're seeing that the privacy implications that they're projecting onto the AI also applies to their own daily lives. And, we are trying to, at Midnight, make that answer being that, we as people are different and have an expectation of privacy and have a way to maintain that privacy. And that's a lot of what we're trying to solve at Midnight.
Yeah. Can I come to you, Bob, on this? In terms of other forces potentially pushing back against privacy, we've obviously seen governments react in different ways to privacy-preserving technologies and to DAOs and so on. We had, of course, the famous, going back to my obsession with North Korea, the famous Tornado Cash example recently, successful prosecution in the US of one of the co-founders of that technology. How do you think governments are going to square with this? And perhaps more importantly, in terms of the stuff that people in this room are developing, how can they potentially work out what governments are going to do and stay on the right side of that? Because fundamentally, government's going to have a dog in this fight, right?
Yeah, if I can maybe answer that first. I mean, if you look at a lot of the large cloud...
Bring Bob in a second. You dive right in there. Don't worry.
No.
There we go. Go ahead.
If you look at a lot of the large companies, the cloud providers, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they tend to be a bit nicer than they used to be in the past. Like if you look at Microsoft, used to be a brutal company. It would just shut people down. But now it's much more of a collaborative company. I think a lot of that comes from their CEO Satya Nadella, who comes from the cloud space, and they realized that one of their biggest products is trust. Because if you're telling these customers, these governments, please come use our cloud services, they have to trust Microsoft to handle that data. And really, at the end of the day, a lot of Microsoft's current revenue and a lot of Google's revenue, a lot of Amazon's revenue comes from these cloud services at this point. And so these companies are at their core at this point selling trust. And a lot of these privacy-preserving technologies allow them to sell trust better. And so I don't think necessarily a lot of the stuff we're building is contradictory to what these companies are doing, but rather helps them sell better trust. And I would hope that governments also, at some point, also feel like they're, in a certain sense, selling trust to their citizens as well.
And if you look at the regulatory landscape as well, what the people in this room can do as they're building applications is be aware of those and be aware of the impacts of them. And you have the GDPR, you have the California privacy laws, you have all sorts of regulation along those lines. Because of the desire to have the restoration of privacy, it's important to understand those. And what we do at Midnight is we provide those developers with the tools that they need to create compliant applications. So learning how to use, when do I disclose data is a regulatory discussion, or it might just be an application discussion. But then how I do that in a responsible way and how I communicate that out, that's really the important thing for the people in this room to take into consideration when working with Midnight.
Good stuff.
View us kind of like the internet.
Yeah.
All sorts of things can happen on the internet.
Yeah.
All sorts of great things can happen on the internet too.
Yeah.
So, with great power comes great responsibility.
Indeed, yeah, it comes back to Sebastian's point about what, the emphasis on the developers and what they're doing. Markulf, where we've got a little bit of time left, I want to come to you on something that's for me, feels quite far out, but might be closer than I think. This sort of post-quantum computing future. You've obviously will have looked at that as part of your research and your studies. It's in your world. How close are we, and how does that impact on the stuff we've been talking about in this panel?
Well, that's the billion-dollar question now. I think we are still a bit off with actual quantum computers being deployed and breaking RSA and all this other good stuff. But it's about time we start preparing for it, and that's because technological transitions take time. Also, you can harvest the data now and decrypt it later. So it's very good to think about it, and often there's a win-win. So one of the promising technologies is lattice-based cryptography, and it's also good for many other reasons. It might even turn out to be more efficient than the traditional cryptography that we use for public key and zero knowledge. So I think it's very good to think about kind of win-wins in this space.
Sebastian, you were nodding at that. You can concur with Markulf, or you?
Yeah, I think at Midnight what we're focusing on is making sure we treat our users with respect and ensure their data is private. And so already in the design of Midnight, we're trying to keep users' data private even if a quantum computer comes later on. So we're already avoiding the kind of a save now, decrypt later. And we're preparing to make sure that we have even more security against quantum adversaries so that they cannot even attack the blockchain at all. And so we're doing a lot of innovative research on here. And to the other point we discussed earlier, a lot of the work we're doing in public, right? We are solving these problems. We're inviting other large companies, other projects come in and work on these large-scale efforts with us. A lot of these partners that come with us are interested in productization, but a lot of them aren't. They're researchers, they're community members that are interested in helping us solve these hard problems. And we at Midnight are being pioneers on the actual delivery and commercialization of a lot of these ideas. So it's really exciting to work with all these people to keep everybody safe.
Okay.
If I could add just to the tail end of that, on the Midnight side of things, we are keeping abreast of the evolution of lattice-based cryptography with the research team and also with NIST and where they're going. But we're also taking measures on the network today that avoid the harvest now, decrypt later type of problem. So we use techniques like statistical blinding for our zero-knowledge proofs so that they're not reversible. The data that's stored in the zero-knowledge proof cannot be reversed back into its original data. That is a huge first step. The second step, the lattice basis signatures, that is a truly existential problem, not just for blockchain, but for the global economy. I mean, literally everything is based on that. So you said it's $1 billion question. I think it's a trillions and trillions of dollar question. That's riskier, which is why it's really great to have so many people working on the problem.
Yeah. I'm going to stay with you, Bob, for a second, and I'll come to the rest of you, just because we're in the dying minutes of this. I just want to sort of fast forward, let's say, 5 years into the future, which might be a long time, depending on how fast innovation happens. What does sort of success for the kind of projects that you're working on look like? If you look at that sort of 5-year timeline, what do you think, if we get, particularly the KPIs that Charles mentioned earlier, what do you think would be success? What would that look like to you?
I already played my hand a little bit on that, which is in 5 years, people are using Midnight and they don't even know it. The privacy is a core part of their daily lives, and we can measure that in terms of the data that's exposed during data breaches. A reduction in that would be a good KPI.
Yeah. So if the have I been owned website is no longer pumping out data, that would be good. Yeah. Sebastien, dying minutes, come to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked that Microsoft back in the day had, this kind of goal, which was a desktop on, a computer on every desk. And I think we can kind of have a similar goal, which is this privacy in every device. And I think we're not far from that future, and our team's working really hard to get there.
Yeah. Markulf, last one to you.
Well, I would say success is if we can use some of the things that we're building to solve the really hard problems that the planet is facing, like democratic problems, environmental problems. I would say that's the real measure of success, survival of the human race.
on that bombshell, fantastic. It's a short panel. I hope that's been some stimulating conversation for you. Our panelists, I'm sure, will be around to chat afterwards if you want to pick their brains as well. For the moment, show your appreciation, please, for Bob, Sebastien, and Markulf. Thank you. Thank you all. Cheers.